I was working at the airport as usual. It was a busy day. I had been running around for hours, moving luggage from one place to another. My feet hurt and I was tired, but I kept going. I knew I had to work hard. I didn't have a choice. I was just a poor girl, and I had to do what I could to survive. That afternoon, I was walking across the airport when I saw something strange. There was a suitcase lying in the middle of the hallway. At first, I thought it was just another bag left behind by a traveler. But when I looked closer, I realized it was different. This suitcase was big, shiny, and looked very expensive. I was curious. Why was it left here? I looked around. There were people walking by, but no one seemed to notice the suitcase. I didn't know what to do. I thought about leaving it there and walking away, but something inside me told me I had to do the right thing. I couldn't just leave it. Maybe it belonged to someone who was in a hurry, or maybe someone had forgotten it. I decided to pick it up and look for its owner. I looked at the suitcase carefully. It was heavy, and the leather was smooth and shiny. There were gold locks on the side, and I could tell it was worth a lot of money. I felt nervous holding it. What if the owner was angry? What if they thought I had taken something? I was just a girl who worked here. I didn't have anything to do with this fancy suitcase. I walked around the airport looking for someone who might be looking for it. Asked a few people if they had seen anyone who had lost their bag, but no one knew anything. I started to feel frustrated. What should I do now? The suitcase was getting heavier, and I felt like I couldn't carry it for much longer. Then a man walked by. He looked young and very rich. He was wearing expensive clothes and looked like he was in a hurry. He was carrying his phone and talking to someone. He didn't notice me at first, but when I looked closer, I saw that he was wearing a gold watch. It was the kind of watch that only rich people wear. I didn't want to bother him, but I had no choice. I had to ask him if he was the owner of the suitcase. I stopped him and said, "Excuse me, sir. Did you lose your suitcase?" He looked at me, surprised, and then looked at the suitcase I was holding. I could see his face change when he saw it. He looked worried for a moment. "Yes, that's mine," he said. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was a little nervous. I thought maybe he was worried someone had stolen it. "Thank you for finding it. I was so busy, I didn't realize it was missing." He smiled, but I could see that he was trying to hide his stress. I felt awkward, standing there holding his suitcase. He was looking at me like he wanted to say something else, but he wasn't sure what to do. "I really appreciate you bringing it back," he said after a moment. "You're a good person." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and gave the suitcase back to him. He seemed so different from the people I usually met. His clothes were so nice, and his face looked calm and confident. I was just a simple girl from a poor family. I couldn't help feeling nervous in front of him. He looked at me for a moment and then smiled. "I know it's not much, but I want to thank you. How about I buy you a drink?" He asked, his smile warm. I was surprised. I didn't expect him to ask me for anything, let alone offer me a drink. I was just doing my job. I thought about it for a second. I wasn't sure if it was okay to accept. I was used to working hard, not taking things from people. But this man seemed kind, and I felt like he wasn't trying to make me feel bad about being poor. Maybe he just wanted to be nice. I hesitated for a moment and then nodded. Okay, I'll have a drink with you. He smiled and said, Great, let's go. He led me to a small cafe in the airport. As we sat down, I could feel my heart beating faster. I didn't know why. Maybe it was because I felt out of place. Everything around me looked so expensive. The chairs, the table, the fancy cups. It was all so different from my everyday life. I worked hard every day just to get by. I never had the chance to drink coffee at places like this. The man, whose name I later learned was Raj, was very kind. He told me about his life, how he traveled a lot for business, and how he had everything he needed but still felt empty inside. He didn't seem happy with his life, even though he had so much. I didn't understand all of it, but I could feel that something was missing in his life. We talked for a while, and I began to feel more comfortable. Raj was not like the other rich people I had seen. He didn't look down on me, and he didn't make me feel small. He listened to me when I spoke, and he didn't make me feel awkward. But at the same time, I felt strange being there with him. I was just a poor girl. How could someone like him be interested in talking to someone like me? As we finished our drinks, Raj smiled and said something that made me feel even more surprised. You know, he said, I have a private island and I'm going there for my birthday. It's far away from here. Why don't you come with me? You can relax and enjoy the place. It'll be a nice break. I was shocked. Why would he invite me to go with him? A poor girl like me to his private island? It didn't make sense. I wanted to say no, but something in me told me to say yes. Maybe this was a chance to see something different. Maybe it would be nice to get away for a while. I didn't know what to do, but I said yes. Okay, I told him, I'll go with you. Raj smiled, and for the first time, I felt like maybe I wasn't as out of place as I thought. The day after Raj invited me to his private island, I found myself at the airport again, waiting for a flight. This time, however, it was different. I wasn't just waiting for a plane to take me to another city for work. I was about to fly to an island, a beautiful, private place that belonged to a rich man I had just met. It felt unreal. I couldn't stop thinking about how strange this all was. I was just a poor girl working at the airport, and now I was going to a place with fancy houses, swimming pools, and expensive things. I had never been to a place like that before. It made me nervous. What would I do there? Would I even fit in? I kept asking myself these questions as I walked through the airport, holding my small bag. Raj had told me not to bring much, just the basics. He said I wouldn't need anything fancy on his island. That made me feel a little better. At least I didn't have to worry about looking perfect or wearing expensive clothes. When I boarded the plane, I found my seat by the window. I looked out at the city below, which seemed so far away now. As the plane took off, I started to feel more and more nervous. I could see the clouds outside, and I thought about what I was leaving behind. My small life in the city, my job at the airport, my family, everything felt far away now. The flight didn't take long. In just a few hours, the plane began to descend. I looked out the window and saw the ocean below, blue and calm. We were getting closer to the island. My heart began to race. What was I getting myself into? What if everything was too different for me? What if I didn't belong there? When we landed, I stepped off the plane and saw Raj waiting for me. He was smiling, looking as calm and confident as always. He waved at me, and I waved back, feeling nervous but also excited. We walked together to a small car, which was waiting to take us to the island's main house. The island was beautiful. I had never seen anything like it before. There were tall trees, flowers everywhere, and the air smelled fresh and sweet. The roads were clean and smooth. I could tell this was a special place, far away from the busy city where I lived. As we drove through the island, I tried to take everything in. The houses were big and white, with big windows and gardens full of colorful plants. There were boats on the beach and people working in the gardens. It was all so different from my life. I wondered how Raj could be so comfortable here. Everything seemed perfect, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. We arrived at a large house by the beach. The house was huge, with tall walls, big glass windows, and a big swimming pool outside. It looked like a place where rich people lived in movies, not like a place for someone like me. I followed Raj inside, and as I stepped into the house, I couldn't help but feel small. Inside, everything was perfect. The floors were shiny and made of marble. There were beautiful paintings on the walls and fancy furniture in every room. The air smelled clean, and everything looked expensive. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt so out of place. Raj seemed to notice my discomfort. He smiled at me and said that I should relax. He told me that the house was mine to enjoy while I was there. He said that I could swim in the pool, walk around the garden, or just sit and enjoy the view. He even said I could have anything I wanted. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to this kind of life. I had never been in a house like this before. I didn't know how to act. I felt like I was living someone else's life. But Raj was kind, and he didn't make me feel bad about anything. He told me to take my time and just enjoy the time we had on the island. That afternoon, I decided to walk around the garden. The flowers were so colorful, and the trees looked like they had been carefully planted. I saw birds flying from tree to tree, and I could hear the sound of the ocean in the distance. It was peaceful, but even though the island was beautiful, I couldn't help but feel like I didn't belong. The more I looked at the house and the people working around it, the more I felt like a stranger. Everyone here was so rich, so different from me. They didn't have to worry about money or how they would get by. They just lived their lives, surrounded by everything they needed. I couldn't imagine living like that. It seemed so far away from my world. That evening, we had dinner in the big dining room. There was a large table with fancy plates, glasses, and food that I had never seen before. I didn't know what to do with all the silverware in front of me. I felt like I was in a dream where I didn't fit in. But Raj was there, smiling and talking to me like it was all normal. We ate together, and Raj told me more about his life. He talked about his family, about his travels, and about his work. But he also told me that sometimes he felt lonely. Despite having everything, he didn't feel happy. I could tell he was trying to explain something, but I didn't fully understand. I wondered why someone like him would feel lonely. He had money, he had a beautiful house, and he could do whatever he wanted. What was missing? As we talked, I began to feel more comfortable around him. He wasn't like the rich people I had seen before. He didn't look down on me. He wasn't trying to make me feel small. But even as I started to relax, I couldn't forget the difference between us. He was so rich, and I was just a poor girl. How could we ever be close when we lived in such different worlds? That night, I went to bed in one of the guest rooms. The bed was soft and the room was quiet, but I couldn't sleep. My mind was full of thoughts. I wondered if this was all just a dream. Would I wake up tomorrow and find myself back in my small apartment? Would I go back to my job at the airport and forget about this place? I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what the future would hold. But for now, I decided to try to enjoy the island, to enjoy the time I had with Raj, and to stop worrying about what might happen later. The next few days on the island were beautiful, but they also made me feel more and more out of place. The island was like a dream. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of the ocean. The sun was warm and the sky was blue. I spent most of my days walking around the gardens, enjoying the peacefulness, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong. Raj was kind. He would show me around and introduce me to the staff who worked on the island. They were all very friendly, but I could tell they were different from me. They all had fancy clothes and spoke with confidence. I felt small in comparison. I was just a poor girl from the city. I worked hard every day just to make ends meet. But here, everything was so easy. People didn't have to worry about money or where their next meal would come from. One afternoon, Raj took me on a boat ride. We went out on the calm sea, and the sun was shining brightly. It was beautiful, and I could see why Raj liked it here. The boat moved slowly across the water, and I could feel the cool breeze on my face. I looked out at the water, watching the waves splash against the boat. It was peaceful, but it also made me feel even more different from Raj. He told me about his life. He explained that he had always lived with wealth and he had traveled to many places. His family owned many businesses, and he was expected to take over when his father retired. Raj seemed so calm when he talked about it, but I could tell that there was a pressure on him. He didn't seem happy with all the responsibilities he had. As we sat together on the boat, I asked him why he seemed so unhappy. I couldn't understand. He had everything. He was rich, and he lived in a beautiful place. What more could he want? Raj didn't answer at first. He looked out at the water, as if thinking. Finally, he turned to me and said that sometimes having everything wasn't enough. He told me that his family wanted him to marry someone who was from a wealthy family, someone who could help their business grow. He said that he didn't feel like he could be himself in his own life. He was always expected to follow the plans that his family made for him. I didn't know what to say. I couldn't imagine living a life like that, where everything was planned for you. My life was simple. I didn't have a lot of money, but I had my family and I had my dreams. I worked hard to make a living. Later that day, Raj took me to a part of the island that I hadn't seen before. It was a quiet area with a small beach. We walked along the sand, and I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin. I liked this place. It was peaceful and away from everything. We sat down on a rock, and Raj told me more about his life. He talked about how he felt lonely sometimes, even with all the people around him. I could see that he was struggling with his life, and I began to understand him better. But even though I understood him more, I still felt unsure. I couldn't forget that he was so rich, and I was just a poor girl. He was a part of a world that I couldn't be a part of. I didn't know how someone like me could be close to someone like him. Over the next few days, I spent more time with Raj, but I couldn't help feeling like I was living in two different worlds. Raj had everything, and I had nothing. He had people who took care of everything for him, and I had to work hard every day just to make enough money to survive. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I didn't belong. I was so different from Raj, and I didn't know how I could ever be a part of his world. Raj must have noticed that I was quiet because one evening he asked me if something was wrong. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to tell him that I felt so out of place. I didn't want to make him feel bad. So I just smiled and told him that everything was fine. But inside, I was torn. I liked Raj and I enjoyed spending time with him, but I couldn't ignore the difference between us. I was just a poor girl, and he was rich. I didn't know how we could ever have a future together. We were from two different worlds. One night, after dinner, we sat on the balcony, looking at the stars. The night was warm, and the sound of the ocean was calming. Raj sat next to me, and we talked about our dreams. I told him that I wanted a better life, that I wanted to do something important with my life. I didn't know what it would be, but I wanted to do something more than just work at the airport. Raj listened quietly, and when I finished, he told me that he understood. He said that he had his own dreams, but he didn't know how to follow them. He was always expected to do what his family wanted, and he didn't know how to break free from that. He said that he felt trapped, like he couldn't make his own choices. I didn't know what to say to him. I didn't know how I could help him. I could see that he was struggling, but I was struggling too. I wanted to follow my dreams, but I didn't have the same opportunities he had. My life was so different from his. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, thinking about everything Raj had said. I kept thinking about how he felt trapped in his life, how he wanted to follow his own path. But I also thought about how different our lives were. He had everything, and I had nothing. The next morning, Raj told me that his family was coming to the island. I didn't know what to expect. He said they would be arriving in a few days. I could see that he wasn't happy about it, but he didn't say much. I wondered what would happen when they arrived. Would they approve of me? Would Raj's family see me as a poor girl who didn't belong on their island? Would Raj choose his family's plans over me? I didn't know, but I could feel the tension building. Things were about to change. A few days later, Raj's family arrived on the island. The house felt different with them there. It was no longer just the two of us in the calm and peaceful place. Now it was filled with noise, laughter, and the busy energy of Raj's family. They were rich, confident, and important people, just like Raj. They had the power to make decisions, and it felt like they had control over everything. I could see the difference between them and me. They were used to a life of luxury and comfort. I could feel their eyes on me. like I didn't belong in their world. I was just a poor girl sitting in the same room as these rich people. I tried my best to act normal, but it was hard. I didn't know how to fit in. Raj seemed happy to see his family, but there was something different about him, too. He was quieter now, more serious. I could tell he was trying to please them, trying to be the person they expected him to be. I didn't know what they wanted from him, but I could feel the pressure in the air. They expected a lot from Raj. They wanted him to follow the family's wishes, to continue their legacy of wealth and power. As the days went by, I spent more time alone. Raj's family was always busy with meetings, dinners, and plans. Raj was with them, doing what they wanted. I didn't feel comfortable with them, and I didn't want to be in the way. So I went for long walks on the beach or sat by myself, thinking. I thought about my life, about what I wanted to do, and about my future. But the more I thought, the more confused I became. I began to notice how much Raj's family wanted him to follow their plans. They wanted him to marry someone who was rich, someone who could bring more power to their family. I saw how his mother looked at him, how she tried to tell him what to do. It was clear to me that Raj wasn't free. He had everything, but he didn't have the freedom to choose what he wanted. He had to live by the rules of his family, and it seemed like they didn't care about what made him happy. One evening, as I sat by myself in the garden, Raj came to find me. He looked tired, and his face was serious. He told me that his family was not happy with me. They didn't think I was the right person for him. I could see the pain in his eyes as he spoke. He didn't want to hurt me, but he knew that his family's wishes were more important than anything else. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I wanted to say something to make him understand, but I couldn't find the words. I was just a poor girl. His family didn't want me there. They didn't want someone like me to be with someone like Raj. They wanted him to marry someone who could help their business, someone who could bring more wealth and power to their family. Raj tried to explain that he didn't agree with his family, but I could see the struggle in his eyes. He was caught between two worlds. On one side, there was me, a girl from a small city with nothing to offer. On the other side, there was his family with all their money and power telling him what to do. I didn't know what to say to him. I wanted to tell him that it didn't matter, that we could be happy together no matter what. But deep down, I knew the truth. Our worlds were too different. His family had all the power, and I had nothing. I was just a poor girl, and he was a rich boy. We didn't belong in the same world. Raj's face looked sad, and he turned away. He walked back to the house without saying anything else. I stayed in the garden, feeling lost and alone. My heart was breaking. I didn't want to lose Raj, but I also knew that he had to choose between me and his family. I couldn't ask him to give up everything for me. The next few days were even harder. Raj seemed distant, and his family became more and more involved in his life. They talked about business, about money, and about the future. It was like they didn't see me at all. I was just a shadow in the background, watching as their world moved forward without me. Raj spent more time with them and less time with me. I could see that he was torn. He was trying to make everyone happy, but it was clear that he was losing himself in the process. I didn't want him to be unhappy, but I didn't know what I could do. I couldn't change the way his family felt. I couldn't change the life that was already planned for him. One evening, I decided to take a walk by the beach. The waves crashed against the shore, and the moonlight shone on the water. It was beautiful, but I felt empty inside. I walked for a long time, lost in my thoughts. I didn't know what to do anymore. My dreams felt so far away, and Raja's life seemed impossible to be a part of. I didn't belong in his world, and he didn't belong in mine. As I walked along the beach, I saw Raj standing in the distance. He was looking out at the water, his back to me. I stopped and watched him for a moment. He looked so alone, even though he was surrounded by his family and all his wealth. He seemed like he was searching for something, but he didn't know what it was. I walked over to him, and for a moment, we just stood there in silence, watching the waves. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was losing him, and I didn't know how to stop it. But I knew that we couldn't go on like this. Our lives were too different, and I couldn't ask him to choose me over his family. Raj turned to me, and his eyes looked sad. He told me that he had to make a decision. He said that he couldn't keep living like this, torn between two worlds. He had to choose a future, and it couldn't be with me. I felt my heart break. The pain was so strong, and I couldn't stop it. I knew it was over. I knew that we couldn't be together. But even as I felt the pain, I also knew that this was the right decision. Our worlds were too different. I was just a poor girl, and he was a rich boy. We couldn't live in the same world. I turned away from him and walked back to the house, my heart heavy with sadness. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew that it would never be the same. I had lost Raj, and I didn't know if I could ever find happiness again. The days after Raj made his decision felt like they were dragging on forever. I woke up every morning with a heavy heart, knowing that things between us had changed forever. He wasn't the same. I wasn't the same. It was like we were two different people living in different worlds, separated by a wall that neither of us could break through. Raj's family had taken over everything again. They were planning more meetings, making decisions about their businesses, and talking about money. They didn't seem to notice how much their actions were affecting Raj. He was just going along with everything, his face tired and his eyes distant. I could see that he wasn't happy, but I didn't know how to help him. I spent more time by myself. I went on long walks around the island, trying to clear my head. The beach was my favorite place to go. The sound of the waves was calming, and the ocean always made me feel a little better, even if just for a moment. But no matter how many walks I took, I couldn't escape the feeling that I had lost something important. Raj still came to see me sometimes. He would find me in the garden or by the beach, and we would sit together in silence. It wasn't the same as before. The love we had felt before was gone, replaced by a strange distance between us. It was like we were both trying to hold on to something that was slipping away, but we didn't know how to stop it. I could see that Raj was struggling. He didn't want to follow the path his family had set for him, but he didn't know how to escape it. He wanted to live his own life, but he couldn't break free from the expectations placed on him. I knew he was trapped, but I didn't know how to help him. I couldn't change his life, and he couldn't change mine. We were just two people caught in different worlds, wanting something that we couldn't have. One evening after dinner, I went to the beach again. I needed to think. The sky was dark, and the stars were shining brightly above me. The air was cool, and the sound of the waves was calming. I sat on the sand, hugging my knees to my chest, and closed my eyes. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe I was hoping for some kind of miracle. Maybe I was hoping that everything would change, and Raj and I could be together again. But deep down, I knew it wasn't possible. Our lives were too different, and I couldn't change who I was. I thought about my life, about everything that had happened. I thought about the dreams I had, the things I wanted to achieve. I had always dreamed of something more, something better, but now it felt like those dreams were fading away. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I couldn't go back to my old life, but I didn't know where I was going either. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Raj walking toward me. His face was serious, and he looked tired, but there was something different in his eyes. For the first time in a long time, he looked like he had made a decision. He sat down next to me, and for a moment, we just stared out at the ocean. The waves crashed against the shore, and the moonlight danced on the water. It was peaceful, but there was a tension between us that made it hard to relax. Raj finally spoke. He said that he had made a choice. He told me that he was going to leave his family's business. He didn't want to live his life for other people anymore. He wanted to follow his own dreams, to live his life the way he wanted to. It was a huge decision, and I could see the fear in his eyes as he spoke. But there was also a sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. I didn't know what to say. I was shocked. Raj had always been so tied to his family and their plans for him. I never imagined that he would leave it all behind. But as he talked, I realized that he had made up his mind. He wasn't going to live a life that didn't make him happy. He was going to take control of his future, even if it meant leaving behind everything he had known. I felt a mix of emotions. I was happy for him. He was finally choosing his own path, and that was something I had always wanted for him. But I also felt scared. What did this mean for us? Could we really be together? We were from two different worlds, and no matter how much we loved each other, there was still so much standing between us. Raj turned to me and took my hand. He said that he wanted to be with me. He told me that he didn't care about the money or the business or his family's plans. He wanted to be with me no matter what. I felt my heart race. It was everything I had ever wanted to hear, but it also scared me. Raj was making a big sacrifice. He was giving up his family, his wealth, his future. And for what? For me, a poor girl with no future of her own. I didn't know how to answer him. I was happy, but I was also scared. I knew that Raj's decision wasn't going to be easy. He would have to face his family, deal with their anger and disappointment. And what would happen to us after that? Would we be able to build a life together? Or would the differences between us be too great to overcome? Raj seemed to sense my hesitation. He squeezed my hand gently and said that we didn't need to have all the answers right now. We just needed to take it one step at a time. As we sat there, the sound of the waves in the background, I thought about what Raj had said. Maybe he was right. Maybe we didn't need to have everything figured out. Maybe the only thing we needed was to be together. It wasn't going to be easy, but maybe it was worth the risk. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope. Raj was choosing me. He was choosing a life that made him happy. And maybe, just maybe, we could figure out how to make it work. The days that followed Raj's decision were difficult, but they were also full of hope. I watched as Raj slowly began to tell his family about his choice. It wasn't easy. His mother and father were very upset. They couldn't understand why he would give up everything for a life that didn't promise money or power. They thought he was making a mistake. His family had always expected him to take over the business, but Raj didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted to follow his own dreams, to live a life that made him happy, and that included being with me. At first, it felt like we were both alone in this. Raj had turned his back on everything he had known, and I had nothing to offer him except my love. But we had each other, and that was something. Every day, we grew stronger together, learning how to live without the luxury and power that his family had given him. We learned to appreciate the small things, simple moments that made us happy, like sitting together on the beach or walking through the island streets hand in hand. We had to be careful. His family was still watching us, and I knew that they weren't happy with Raj's decision. They tried to convince him to change his mind, but he stood firm. It wasn't just his family that we had to worry about. Raj had lived a life of comfort and security, and now everything was different. We had to find new ways to make a living. Raj didn't know what to do. He didn't have a job, and I didn't have much to offer either. I had a small savings, but it was nothing compared to what Raj had grown up with. We both worked hard, finding small jobs around the island, doing what we could to survive. It wasn't easy, but we were learning. Every day was a new challenge, but we faced it together. The hardest part was the guilt Raj felt. He loved his family, but he knew that they didn't understand him. They didn't understand why he had made this choice. He had given up everything to be with me, and it hurt him to see his family angry and disappointed. I could see the sadness in his eyes, and it made me feel even more uncertain about our future. But I also saw something else in Raj's strength. He was determined to live his life for himself, not for anyone else. And in a strange way, that gave me hope. We didn't have a clear plan for the future, but we were starting to figure things out. Raj found a small job on the island, helping with local businesses that needed help. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I also found work doing odd jobs for people who lived on the island. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was all we needed. One afternoon, after a long day of work, Raj and I sat together on the beach, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with colors of orange and pink, and the sound of the waves was peaceful. It felt like we were the only two people in the world. I leaned my head on Raj's shoulder and closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. "I'm glad we're doing this," Raj said quietly. "I'm glad we're together." I smiled. Me too. Even though it's hard sometimes, I know that we can make it. Raj nodded. I know. It's not easy, but we're building something real, something that's ours. We didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. We didn't have the things that Raj's family had: money, power, success. but we had love. And sometimes that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Raj's family slowly started to accept his decision, even though it took time. They still didn't understand it fully, but they could see that Raj was happy. He was different now, more confident, more at peace with himself. He didn't need to live up to their expectations anymore. He had found his own way, and that made all the difference. As for me, I had learned to be more confident too. I had come from nothing, and I had always thought that I wasn't good enough for someone like Raj. But now I knew that love wasn't about money or status. It was about being there for each other, supporting each other, and building a life together. One day, after a long day of work, Raj came to me with a big smile on his face. He had found a better job. It wasn't a rich job, but it paid more, and it meant that we could finally start saving for our future. I was so happy for him, but I was even more happy for us. We were building something together, something real, something that we could both be proud of. As the months passed, we grew stronger and our love grew deeper. We learned how to live without the luxuries that Raj's family had, but we also learned that those things didn't matter. What mattered was that we had each other. We didn't know what the future would hold, but we were ready to face it together. And so our journey continued. We were still far from perfect, but we were building a life that we could both be proud of. Raj had made the right choice. He had chosen a life of happiness over power, and I had chosen him. Together, we were writing our own story, a story of love, hope, and a future that was ours to create. As I sat with Raj on the beach one last time, watching the sunset, I realized that this was only the beginning. Our story was far from over. The challenges were not behind us, but we had each other, and together we could face anything. We had made it this far, and we were going to make it even further. With love, anything was possible.